Welcome to We Are Everyone, a video and podcast series powered by Pivotal Moments, and we focus on the intersection of mental wellness in the workforce. We bring together young professionals and mindful executive mentors to bridge the generational gap and bring to the surface conversations about the importance of mental wellness and how to overcome career tradition challenges. Mental wellness is paramount. Join us. Welcome to We Are Everyone. I'm your host, Jen Sherman, and we are in season 4. We have two very special guests today. We have Sara Batista. She is a licensed professional counselor. As you know, with this season, we are bringing on all of our guests. At least one of them will be a verified mental health professional, along with another star. We have Saroya Tinker. She is the NWHL defenseman, so let's go women's hockey, and also a recent graduate of Yale. So welcome to you both. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Great. How about you? Excited.
Yeah, I'm great.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us on.
Of course. Thanks for being here. So I guess before we just kind of get to the interview, it'd be great to get some context on both of you amazing ladies. So Saroya, we'll include, of course, the whole bio and everything in the show notes. But if you could just tell us a little about yourself and then, follow up with Sara before we get started.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Saroya Tinker. I'm originally from Oshawa, Ontario. So it's part of the GTA just outside of Toronto. I grew up playing hockey from an early age, about 5 or 6, but had experienced a lot of racism in the game. My hockey career led me to play for Team Canada and win a silver medal. It also led me to Yale, and that's where I received my education. And now I play professionally for the NWHL's Toronto Six as a defenseman. I've been doing a lot of activist work, talking about Black Lives Matter and diversity inclusion in the hockey community. And I run my mentorship program for these young girls. And I actually have my own podcast now as well. So yeah.
What's it called?
My podcast, we just released our trailer today, and the first episode comes out on the 13th, on July 13th. And my podcast is about athletes as activists, and it's called Shut Up and Play.
I love it. That's a really good
Very
name.
cool.
I can't wait to subscribe and listen.
For sure.
So Sara.
Yeah, so that's a tough act to follow, huh? I'm totally impressed and blown away by that. I am a licensed professional counselor. I'm licensed in both DC and Maryland. I work with primarily young adults. I have my own private practice, and I work with a range of clients, primarily those struggling with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, bipolar disorder. That's sort of my thing. I have a lot of college students that I work with, and I really love that age range. So yeah, as far as my professional background, that's a little bit about me. Again, not quite as impressive as Saroya's, but that's okay.
That's awesome. And I think, kind of given the reason we started this show was based on the onset of the pandemic and knowing that, there's been a lot of things around mental health that's been going on for years, conversations that we need to have for years, but all of it really came to the surface when the pandemic started. And now we're really coming into the mental health pandemic and recognizing that. So, having these conversations, particularly around young adults and college students, the amount of resilience that we really need is by far more than particularly some of our older counterparts who've just have more experience and perspective. And so that kind of brings us into, our first topic of mental fitness, right? And I think both Saroya and Sara, you can speak to probably mental fitness in different aspects, but, we talk about this term at Pivotal Moments. We like to focus on mental fitness and being proactive rather than mental health, right? So I think, or mental, and I hate having to say anything with it that's negative around mental health, right? So and mental strength. So I wanted to, ask you, and Saroya, if you want to start with, what do you think of when you hear the term mental fitness?
Yeah, so obviously a lot goes into being an athlete, and a lot of that involves physical fitness. But I found as I've furthered along in my career that mental fitness is oftentimes more important than my physical fitness. I know my physical fitness will be there and I know how to maintain that, but mental fitness to me, I think of the word self-care. I think that comes up for me just because that's what I need to do in order to be mentally fit. And I think that also revolves around how fast and how you know how to recover from an anxiety attack or something you may be going through, and how to refocus. So for myself, mental fitness to me means how often and how easily I can manage to refocus and regain that element of self-care in my regimen.
I love that. I think self-care is really important. How about you, Sarah?
I think that was an awesome response. The idea of mental fitness, it's not a clinical term, but I think it is a term that a lot of us sort of resonate with, especially because of COVID. To your earlier point, Jen, I think it brought so much awareness to mental health and self-care and what are we doing? So I really think about like mental fitness, what is each individual doing to attend to their own psychology, right? Like, are you being mindful? Are you present? Are you attending to your emotions? Are you decompressing when you need to? And like, are you prioritizing that the same way you would prioritize attending to your medical or physical health? So that's sort of how I interpret it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Sarah, because that's another aspect where we talk to, some of our counterparts, like Joe, who is also a therapist, is another friend of ours, and a lot of things are coming out around, the reason why I wanted to change it up this season is because we can speak. I like to always say, like, I am not a licensed professional. I can't say what the neurons are going on in your head or why there's what for what. I just know that my Peloton makes me feel good. Shout out to Cody Rigsby. Makes me laugh all the time. But like, that's not like, there's not a prescription that it solves. You kind of have to figure out, it's like that combination of self-care, but also understanding like, it's not like self-care and okay, that means that all the emotions that you suppressed for a very long time goes away, right? So to your point, right, Sarah, I think that's really important to recognize.
Yeah, I think that it's really, for me at least, about doing the work. Like I personally believe that we've almost veered too far into this like wellness culture where there's a lot of toxic positivity. I see that's like, you can't allow yourself to be down for 1 minute. Like, you should be grateful for XYZ. Here's what to do to get out of that headspace. And like, I think we really need a balance. Like you said, suppressing all those emotions or doing something that feels good in the moment just to make emotional discomfort go away. To me, that's not mental fitness. That is not going to create emotion regulation that is positive for an individual. That can actually be really harmful.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said before, in terms of physical fitness versus mental fitness, it's the same thing. We have to look deeper and find out what workouts work for us. Different workouts work for different people, just as different therapy works for different people, whether you go to therapy or whether you think that you can handle it yourself and you're reading a book or you're journaling or things like that. So it goes along with physical fitness, but you got to find how it works for you.
Completely agree. And that kind of takes into that kind of like transitions to the qualities of resilience, grit, and compassion, and really like emphasizing compassion, because I think you get resilience and grit from compassion, and they're found, or not found within the younger generation. Like, how do you think these qualities are found within the younger generation and not found? And then, do you have any memories or experiences that have challenged these qualities?
Yeah, I think for the younger generation, I see a lot of resilience and grit on a daily basis. But at the same time, I think that the younger generation, we need to learn how to be compassionate towards ourselves. I know for myself, I'm always the type to have a full schedule and want to be doing the next thing always. But at the same time, I need to be compassionate for myself and figure out what I need to do to be able to perform at my best and be able to offer all those things that people want me to offer and are asking me for. But I do think that the younger generation has been able to stand up for the things that they believe in, and really show that they can take control, and really show that they believe in their opinions, and stand for that. So I think that that's an awesome part. But at the same time, like you said, we live in a culture with a lot of toxic positivity. And I think that that's also something that we see going on within the younger generation as well, just because we are so glued to social media.
Completely agree.
I mean, absolutely couldn't have said it better myself. I know that this younger generation gets a lot of criticism around being super sensitive and things like that. From my perspective, being sensitive is a good thing. It's a strength. It's a sign of resiliency. And it's like, finally, to your point around activism, they're speaking up and doing things that have needed to be done for a really long time. And I view them as incredibly passionate and driven. I do think there's ways in which all of us could hold more empathy for each other. And I think, especially the political division in this country, sometimes we lose sight of like the human experience that connects all of us. But I really think that I see this generation in a lot of ways doing the work and like really pushing themselves to try and make a difference. Yeah.
Going to your point around activism and empathy and compassion, I mean, the fact that we are in a society too where we can have a voice, and also, it's kind of like the breaking of the bread. I always like to give the breaking of the bread as a really great aspect of, rather than like polarizing, rather than being like sitting here and not being able to have a conversation around black, white, rainbow, right? It's really about, okay, let's sit down, break some bread, and talk about it, right? Because perspective is so important here too, where instead of kind of, we see something in social media can be dangerous, where you see someone or something in the media, and they just hop on that bandwagon because they just see it, and then everyone else is hopping on it, and it's like, all right, guys, let's just do some research behind why this is happening, right? Like, do some research behind it, and then this way you can show up, break bread, and have a conversation, because that's really what's going to lead to change and societal change. And I think that affecting on our mental health and mental fitness and mental strength and toxic positivity, it's like, I think that's just going to really help move the needle. And I do feel that the younger generation, paired with the older generation of wisdom that they have that we don't, will be able to move the ball forward. And so
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I think listening to each other is a big part of that. And being willing to hear and be humbled by other people's experience, obviously, especially as a mental health clinician, I'm like hyper aware of the privilege that I'm coming in with. And so that was one of the best parts of going to graduate school, was hearing from people who historically have been marginalized and trying to understand mental health from that perspective. And so talk about resiliency, right? Hearing these stories of adversity and all of that, it's recognizing the different ways in which you can have grit and drive, and the different ways in which you can persevere. But I do think we just have to start with like the basics of listening.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I've had a lot of conversations later this week and this month and stuff that revolve around having uncomfortable conversations. And just because just because you had an experience doesn't mean that the other person had that same experience. And I think it's important that we listen to other people and understand where they're coming from, because we often have to realize that a lot of emotions that a lot of people express aren't because of you, it's because of something that they've gone through. So with that, we need to listen.
Yeah. Completely agree. And I think we're also, in a culture where, at least for me, it's like, being a, you kind of look, it's kind of like you never judge a book by its cover. You know what I'm saying? And I think we're thinking about like, this kind of thinks about like social media and the impact social media has on mental health and fitness, is like, again, there is like I'm not saying the basic surface, but there is that, Instagram story or changing a profile picture for something, right? That's like the number one, like, communication thing you can do. But the number two is going more so under the surface of what you're putting out there, what you're doing. And, is is it ostracizing? Like, do you think people feel more community or ostracization due to the way we interact online? I mean, it's kind of like such a 24-hour thing sometimes. And it's like, what's coming out of that, right? Like, you know, what I would rather do is sit here and talk about this, right? And have these conversations and bring together people from all walks of life where, you know, that's where I think the change will happen. But I'm curious to hear, you know, just based on, especially you with Saroya, like, you know, Sara and I, we had, you know, Facebook in high school and we made silly videos on each other's walls, but we weren't really like that in the weeds
Yeah.
growing up. So I'm curious for you, you know, how has that kind of affected you with social and, you know, mental health and fitness for as
Yeah.
you were, you know, entering into your adolescent years?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think that I could say a wide range of things here. But I think what I've noticed for myself since being given a platform as an athlete, I've noticed that I quite often post for the satisfaction of other people now.
Mm.
And with that, I kind of have to look back at the end of each day and realize, well, what did I take in today versus what did I put out? And I think a lot of people need to focus on that. It's about who you follow. It's about what you post on social media.
Yes.
You could be on your timeline and have a bunch of toxic positivity things just coming up on your timeline, but that goes with who you follow and who you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And over my time on social media, I think that I've really had to realize who I want to be in contact with. And I mean, if that involves me not following a friend, maybe, then so be it. But I think we really
Yep.
need to dive into the things that we follow and the things that we support on social,
Yes.
because I mean, I'm not one to support something that I don't stand for or I don't personally like. But I think we are in a culture where often people post for the satisfaction of others, like I said, and
Yes.
that's not what we want, and that's the toxic part of it.
Completely agree.
100%. I mean,
Mm.
all of that as you're talking totally resonates with me, especially as I think about the experiences and the perspective I hear about from like the high school and college kids that I work with. Like that can, I was just about to, am I allowed to curse on this? I don't know. I was going to say that can really fuck with your head. And so I think that it is so important. I think it's not as black and white. Is social media good or bad? From my perspective, I recognize that there's merits of it, and I recognize that there can be positivity and connection and growth, all of these things. For me, it boils down to intention. So, to your point,
Mhm.
Soroya, it's like, are you being mindful when you log on? Are you checking in with yourself of how am I feeling in this moment? What does this post bring up for me? Is this my stuff or is that their stuff? And this is somebody that I need to unfollow. Like,
Yeah.
really being present with the experience and making sure that you're giving more emphasis to the accounts that make you feel good about yourself or others and validated, and trying to not get too lost in the accounts that make you feel badly. But it's
Mhm.
really tough. That's a tough ask to ask somebody to be so present when they're doing something that oftentimes is pretty mindless.
And I think we also have to realize how ingrained it is and how a lot of people don't realize what they're looking at.
That's
Example
right.
for myself, I used to follow so many different workout accounts of girls posting their workouts and whatnot, but for myself, of course, enjoyed the workout piece of it and probably picked up a few new workouts. But at the same time, I'm scrolling on my feed and I'm seeing these skinny, perfect looking girls that I know I'm a
Hmm.
professional athlete and work out 7 times a week and don't look like that. So it's
Yep.
so important. Like, it's just workouts that I'm watching, but at the same time, I'm being influenced by the women that are posting these things. So
Yes.
it's really, we really have to look deeper into why we're following, what we're following, and how we want it to affect us.
Yeah. I, as an eating disorder clinician, cannot emphasize that enough, that
Hmm.
so much of this is subconscious. Like, of course, we have all heard by this point that advertisements, people Photoshop, whatever, but like subconsciously, that impacts us, that stays with us.
Hmm.
And so to really recognize, yeah, what's being stirred up for you, the people that are vulnerable and being targeted, there's really disturbing research around the connection between social media and depression, and social media and eating disorders, where in countries that didn't have social media, once they introduced it, like they didn't have eating disorders, and then they introduced social media and those rates skyrocketed. And so I think it is, of course, not everybody who's looking at workout pages has an eating disorder by any means, but it's important to notice what comes up for you and how much you're buying into it.
Mhm.
Completely agree. And also, you don't even realize, like, I think the subconscious of social media, as someone who actually is, I wish sometimes, my spiritual guide said to me, he was like, well, why don't you, detach from social media for a week? I was like, Jared, I would love to do that, but like, I can't, because then I wouldn't be able to get paid. So like, I
Yeah.
can't physically do that. But I mean, you don't know what subconsciously sometimes it's doing, where you like go in with that
Yes.
intention, and then you like, it's like when I was watching TikTok videos, like legit for 3 hours, like in the like height of the pandemic, because I couldn't watch the news. I'm like, my eyes hurt, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why I'm having these anxious feelings. And so like being really in check with your body and like
Mhm.
emotions and triggers is also, I think, what I found. And that's, again, what personally works for me, has been really great. And I think, this kind of ties into kind of the next topic of the approach to mental health, like your approach, right? I mean, frankly, Saroya, it's taken you to come to where you are. You've had to experience, have perspective, and push through these. Like, you have to build the grit that you have. And I remember in one of our
Yeah.
original conversations, I was like, you are so emotionally intelligent. And I didn't even know what perspective meant at 20 years old, right? And I was like in this bubble. And so I'm curious, Saroya, if you want to start, and then, Sara, for you to take over, and same question for you, is how has your like perspective and approach to mental health evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a journey for me. I don't think a lot of people know exactly what I've been through, or what I talk about. I'm not an oversharer in that sense, only with the people that I'm closest with. But I had a huge mental health journey at Yale. In high school, I remember being depressed and thinking something was wrong with me, and everybody around me is like, "Oh, it's okay. You're just stressed out." Obviously, I'm trying to get the grades to get into Yale and things like that. But then when I got to Yale my freshman year, I was so homesick and just like really hated myself, if I'm being completely honest. I felt like I wasn't good enough to be at an Ivy League school. I felt like I wasn't intelligent enough in comparison to the kids in my class. And my trainer on my team just kept on telling me, you need to go to Yale Mental Health and Counseling. Just try it. And for me, I thought it was stupid. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to tell my friends. I didn't want to tell my therapist what was going on. I felt like I could deal with it in my own head. But that's not how that happened. And come my junior year, I finally made an effort to go regularly. And I think that was the biggest growth period of my life so far. So junior and senior year, I went to my meetings regularly. I was medicated, and I still am to this day, which, I mean, I think a lot of other people need to express and talk about as athletes, because it's not as open as it should be. But yeah, for myself, I've had a long journey and a lot of struggles along the way. But at the same time, I think that it was me realizing that I actually needed to do something for myself and talk to someone.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Saroya, because I know sometimes it's like, I feel like I'm an overshare. I walk into the room and like, here's like all my laundry, or I don't like put laundry that's negative, but here's my experience. So this is Jen.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. But yeah, so how about you, Sara? Because I mean, frankly, from coming from, being a licensed therapist, and coming out of school, and how did you start that journey for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question because I think there's so many layers to it. But certainly my understanding of mental health has evolved over time. I think some of that just comes with like age and maturity. I think something I'm acutely aware of now, sort of like, even just hearing what Saroya just shared, it's this element of vulnerability. That is something that feels so much more crucial to me than it did in the past in terms of the power of sharing stories and connecting with other people and being real and authentic and like not being okay all the time, right? And so I think that that was something. I came out of college and went into grad school, and I think that in my mind, therapy was all about making people feel better and like, how do I fix this problem? And now I have a completely different understanding of it. Of, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, hopefully long term, I want my clients to feel better and empowered with tools, but it's not just about eliminating symptoms. It's about improving somebody's quality of life and their ability to be with their emotions. And so, yeah, the reality is that uncomfortable emotions are part of the human experience. And so my goal oftentimes is not to help people feel good, it's to help people feel and to feel everything.
Frankly, Sarah, I love that response because I think, for someone who, and I talk about this all the time, as someone who manages anxiety, my mom would always say, okay, Jen, you need to switch your therapist or switch something because you need to get your anxiety under control. And anxiety doesn't go away, FYI. Anxiety is anxiety, or at least for some people. I think everyone particularly again, sorry, I'm not a licensed professional, but I do think everyone has to experience some kind of anxiety, but they don't know how to name it or whatever. But for me, my whole thing is that I have to learn how to manage my anxiety in a sense where it's healthy and it's balanced. And I feel those feelings, but I know how to be able to have the tools to keep moving on with my day and not sit in a spiral of anxiety all day, right? So I think that, to Sarah's point, is being able to live with these emotions and have a better quality of life. And of course, thank God for medicine. Thank God for, I think the holistic and the holistic approach and medicine approach, giving, what works for everyone is just important. And I'm curious to, as we are, we're not baby boomers sitting here. I hate to always talk about young professionals because I just don't ever like to be called young, but, where do you see the younger generation? Like, how do you see their approach to mental health moving forward? I do see, like, when I was in my spiral and on TikTok, that like we are talking about these things and we're more open about it. But like, there's a difference between like seeing a TikTok video of someone coming out about an eating disorder and like someone might see that and relate. But like, there kind of has to be a medium here because you have like the 13 reasons why, and then but like, it's like so much. So like, I'm curious to see where you see it going with the younger generation.
I have a lot of thoughts, but Saroya, do you have thoughts first you want to share?
I mean, I think, like Sarah said last question or so, not necessarily helping people feel better or feel good, but teaching them how to feel. I think the younger generation, I think we've lived in a society in the past that has told us to hide our emotions and not feel the way we inherently feel. So in that sense, I think the younger generation is becoming more aware of how they feel, whether it's good or bad. And I think that that's a good thing. And it's also more socially acceptable now to talk about your mental health issues you're experiencing, just because so many other people have been open about it. That being said, I do think it needs to be more open and more talked about. But at the same time, we are moving in the right direction, in my opinion.
Right, we're normalizing it. We're creating space for people to not be okay in terms of their mental health or to have any range of experiences, whereas that was really taboo in the past. And I think it's a huge point of tension between generations, frankly, because I think about, my parents' generation, at least, and I'm sure older, but I don't know the names of the different generations, whatever. But what I see from them and hear from them, so often it's like, well, back in the day, we didn't have all these things, this kind of like white knuckle it through approach to life. And I get that and have respect for it for sure. And also, I think that's why oftentimes the younger generation gets critiqued for being so sensitive. And so I think it is just a really interesting contrast as far as how far we've come, where Maybe some people even over identify what's happening with their mental health, and that's fine. I do think that it comes down to somebody's intention, though, as far as how they are talking about their mental health and being present with that on social media. Of course, we don't want people to be purely performative about it. We want people to also be thinking about what are the resources that are available to me? Like, now that I've shared this experience and I've accepted the struggle, are there things I can do to take care of those emotions? Because I know the whole like victim thing is something that the younger generation is also critiqued for. I'm not a fan of that at all. Want to go on the record with that because anyways, I think there's a lot of problematic components to those type of labels. I do think, though, that there's something to be said for resilience and empowering ourselves to get the help that we need for those who have the resources to do that.
Yeah. To your point, Sarah, I think, not to get, thinking about access, it's something where the aspect of mental health or anxiety, it's like sometimes like, oh, it's a luxury to have some of these feelings sometimes because like, you have the time to have these feelings, right? But at the end of the day, it's kind of like everyone is made up with the same type of molecules and the same type of everything. I think like a lot of the things that can actually fix this, like just even systemic thing. Systemic, thank you. I have dyslexia. So systemic challenges that we have really within, our whole, we could talk about US, Canada, hey neighbor, and just the world in general, is that if we actually tackle some of the mental fitness, mental strength, and mental health and make it more accessible, I think that can actually help with the systematic challenges that we have as well. That's just a side note. But something else that you brought up too is, in general, where if I approached my dad, it's the older generation, I approached my dad and I'm like, this is what's going on. He's like, you have this and this and this and this. And he's like, but I was like, so what's wrong? I said, you don't understand anxiety then, or you haven't really been able. And I think that's where it's going to be interesting, where this whole victim, it's like, this is not playing a victim. This is sharing some feelings and hoping that the person who I'm speaking to is in a place of listening and can hold space for me to share those feelings and be able to at least say, listen, I haven't felt those exact same feelings before, but that makes sense and I hear you. And that is the only way that we're going to be able to really operate, because the older generation aren't going anywhere and we're going to eventually, grow up too. So I just think, to your point, Sarah, that's really important.
Yeah, just making space to validate each other and again, being open to listening. That for the most part, I don't think that people stand to gain anything from presenting their experience or their struggles or the adversity that they've faced. I'm always really interested in people who have a strong reaction and immediately try to diminish somebody else's suffering. I'm like, what was just triggering for you? What is it about that feels so threatening that you have to automatically minimize somebody else's experience? And I think about this a lot in terms of race as well, and the Black Lives Matter movement. And like automatically we had all these white people being like, white, like all lives matter. And it's like, wait a second, let's back up. Why did you automatically feel like you had to diminish the fact that somebody else has, why, in what way, what would any Black person stand to gain from creating a narrative that they were a victim? Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, to me, all of this stuff is connected in that it can be really threatening for certain individuals to accept or acknowledge the fact that somebody else is suffering in a way that they may or may not be able to understand. And so I think we're quick to shut it down. And that's really, I think conversations and openness are such an important goal to work towards for that reason. There's no other way to bridge that gap.
I mean, and those who do shut down others in terms of them sharing their experiences, those are also people who most likely if that's their reaction, they need therapy as well. And they need to identify
Mm,
their own internal battles that they're going through, and why that specific instance made them feel like that. So I think that just goes to show how needed and how much of a necessity you are.
yeah. Well, and not to make it totally political, but I already did. And so I have to be honest that I don't know, at least, and granted, DC is really a pretty liberal place, but I don't know how many of those people are seeking therapy. I hope they are somewhere, but I think that, there's, I think we have to just, as a whole, become more open to the reality that we might not have all the answers, and also destigmatize mental health care so that it doesn't feel like something that is just for, okay, this person had a problem, right? They lost a family member, or they're crazy, or they have some, they're hearing voices and so they need to go to therapy.
Mm.
Like, I genuinely believe that if all of us invested some time and energy into self-reflection and went to therapy just to learn about ourselves and grow a little bit, that would be so helpful because we would have a better understanding of what was coming up for each of us.
Mm.
You have to want to do
110%.
that work. So, not sure
It all
everyone
start
wants that.
it all starts with when I do the work. I'll tell you that. But the thing is I think everyone, like the whole thing with what Pivotal Moments is about is being proactive about your mental health. So you don't have to then just be proactive about it. I mean, why not? I mean, why not go talk to someone about your week, like how things
Right.
are going for,
Mm.
there's no reason not to. And something else that you brought up too, Sarah, is that, and Saroya, is that, we're, the trigger of why someone gets so angry about something, which is, that's another thing, is that you realize you're like, I read one very good book called The Four Agreements. And the two ones that stuck out to me was don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally. Because half the
Yeah.
time conversations revolve around like things that are coming up all the time of your experiences. I don't know, Saroya, I was like, I can tell from our conversations, and thank you for being so open up, and I can hold space for that, but I don't know how you're feeling inside. I don't know what's going through out your head. Neither do
Yeah.
I with Sarah. So it's like, that's the difference here, is when we, especially with some sensitive issues or topics around race, religion, culture, I feel like we're kind of in this world where, too, sometimes where it's like who's the bigger victim in regards, like, I feel like if I'm in a conversation and I know on paper, I'm a white girl, but I'm actually a white Jewish girl with Holocaust survivors or grandparents, but I don't have to have a conversation like just to, like, where you have to say, like, you have to feel that you have to kind of talk about how you have had a different situation or you've experienced adversity at some point. It's like, why can't we just all show up as the same person and talk about it? You know what I'm saying? And I think
Yeah.
that's just something that will be interesting as well.
Right. If we could validate that without engaging in the comparison game and going
Yep.
tit for tat and all that, to be able to validate that, somebody can be suffering in one way and be struggling with anxiety, right? And that's not to say that it's the same thing or just as bad as a kid starving in Africa, but that they can both be valid in their own ways and we don't have to compare them. I think that's really tough for people. And
Mm.
most often I see people invalidating themselves in that way, that
Mm-hmm.
like they don't have the right to be struggling in one way or another. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree. I think we all need to be more compassionate and be better listeners. I think that's the main message that I get from that is just listen. I know oftentimes, regardless of the person you're having a conversation with, and if you're venting about something, I know for myself, I could rant about something for an hour and a half, and as long as they're sitting there, they might not have the odd reply. They might just say yes, okay, I'm sorry. Those things make you feel validated. And I think that it's so
Yes.
important that we have better listeners within our communities and within our circles that we surround ourselves in.
I love that.
Yes, it's the power of just listening and validating. I can't tell you how many conversations, probably on a daily basis, I have somebody, some client typically that says to me, like, what's the point in talking about that? It's not going to fix it. And it's like, as support people to one another and allies, our job is not to fix it. I mean, certainly there are times when problem solving and advice can be helpful, but just listening and validating and saying, that sounds really hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that. That is what's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even I mean, for myself and my significant other, he just says, "Just tell me you got me," and just sit there.
Yeah.
And like, if that's all, like, that's not hard to do. And I think so many more people need
Yeah.
to realize that oftentimes it's not hard to do what people need in terms of their emotions and their mental support. So if it's as easy as saying "I got you," then we should all be willing to do that.
Yeah, and I give him credit for being able to name that, because I think oftentimes, especially just in terms of gender role
Yeah.
socialization, I think that men are not taught to think about, okay, here's, let's talk about your emotions and then identify and express what it is you need. And so I actually think for him to be able to say, here's what you can do for me, it takes off a lot of the pressure of the guessing game and also helps him get his needs met.
Yeah.
100%. And I think just one last thing before we go into the last topic is, being able to, I love the point of what Saroya just said, is like, I think I process through people. Like, that's like something, that's how I like, that's what my form of like processing my stuff. And sometimes you're just like venting and like, you're not actually, you don't mean half the stuff you're coming, but you're just processing through all these different mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love, it's like, just being like, all right, this is me venting. Like, this is it. Like, don't take any of this with a grain of salt. I'm just venting. But I think that communication, like open communication is literally the best thing you can have, because that there's so many things that are just like so left either unsaid or, if you don't explain things. So I think, I just wanted to reiterate that real quick before we move on to the last topic, which we've spoken a lot about. I don't know if that's your art in the background, Saroya, but Saroya also paints and she's really good. I stalk her Instagram about it, but we've spoken kind of at a higher level around, kind of society or societal and, of course, some of the personal experiences, but one of the questions we like to ask our guests is, how do you fuel your mental fitness muscle? And for, it could be, fuel doesn't really I don't really think about like taking a walk outside, but maybe that does fuel you. It could, you listen into your favorite jam, but I'm curious if maybe it's singing in the shower, but I'm curious, Saroya or Sara, if you want to start, what fuels your mental fitness muscle?
Yeah, for myself, I paint, as you mentioned. So, for myself, I think through college, I definitely should have been painting through college, but picked my paintbrush back up around senior year when I was really struggling. But painting has been an outlet for me. Just to be able to stand at my canvas with my paintbrush and just like feel the paint on the canvas. I think that's really calming for me in terms of anxiety. And I love seeing my finished pieces and it makes me really happy. And I mean, fortunately enough, I've been able to make it a side hustle and sell my paintings on the side. But I mean, for myself, I could paint 1,000 things and not sell them. It's just my way of coping and my peace, really.
Love it.
I love that. There's definitely something so therapeutic also about just creating. For myself, especially as the work I do gets pretty heavy, right? And so I do invest a lot of time and energy into my own mental health care on a regular basis because I find it necessary and it helps me do my job. So definitely remaining engaged in my own mental health care is huge. I'm very committed to that, individual therapy, group therapy, all the things, life coaching, shout out to Dolores, like all of those, I think it's so crucial to be taking care of me and recognizing that it's better to be proactive. So that and during COVID, I've really discovered plants. Jen, you've seen how many I have. It's really a hoarding situation. Some of them should be taken from me. But yeah, really deep into the rare plant game. I'm into horticultural therapy and learning about that and dogs. But sometimes it's just listening to whatever it is that I need in the moment, because that definitely changes based on whatever type of day I've had.
Yeah, I definitely think having that outlet's really important. I really do wish I was good at art. I love art. I love looking at it. That's one thing that like,
I mean, you don't even have to be good at it. Like those like
Right.
paint mixing videos, those are so soothing. Just buy some I'll send you some oil paint. Just, mix it up. It makes you feel good.
Yeah.
maybe I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah, I should do that. I'm gonna because I'll do it on my balcony. I'm a little OCD, so if something moves, I don't know if I could deal with the mess but if I do it outside, maybe like that would all right. That
Maybe
I will
that's
make
a
that
good
happen.
reason to do it. That's a good reason to do it right there. And as they say in art therapy world, it's process, not product. So it's like mindfulness and creating something. And if it's ugly, that's fine. So I encourage it. My art is really not great. I have a little thing right here that I made. I'm just going to show you guys for laughs because I was like so proud of it. And it's literally like a little kid could make it, but I don't care. I made
I
this
think that's
crazy
solid.
galaxy thing.
That's cool.
I
Yeah.
don't know which way it goes actually.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm like,
maybe,
that's
follow
what
up
I
from
was
this.
feeling.
Yeah, maybe follow up from this. We'll do a little, Zoom session, the three of us with some live art class. I love it. I love
An
it.
art therapist, maybe. I have a friend I'll
Oh my
introduce.
God, let's do it. Let's do it. Well, I do, I don't want to take up too much of your time today. This has been a great conversation. I wanted to give you guys both the opportunity, or ladies, excuse me, to, if there's anything else you wanted to share with the audience before we wrapped up today.
Yeah, no, I mean, everyone can follow me on social. It's Saroya Tinker 71. That's 71's my playing number as well. I'll be with the Six next season. But I also run my mentorship program where I mentor young Black women in hockey. So people can find that on my social. And I love chatting with my younger girls. I mentor from 9 to 19. So I always love chatting with them. But yeah, thank you so much.
Love that.
I love that too. And I think my closing statements would be just encouraging people to seek out mental health care, give it a try, even if you think you don't need it or there's no point. There are resources, Psychology Today, there are community-based resources, free or low cost. It's accessible. Of course, resources make a difference, but for the most part, depending on where you live, if you go even on your government website for the state you live in, you'll be able to find some type of access to behavioral health care. And I encourage people to really just to do that, to offer themselves permission to get mental health care.
I love that. Well, thank you. I feel like for the two of you, we have two very good plethora of resources there. And we'll obviously share all those things in the show notes and everything, but I just want to thank you both so much. I'm so happy that you were able to make this today, and I have a feeling we're going to be all the three of us talking again. And just to remind the audience, we have Sara Batista. She's a licensed professional counselor, and we have Saroya Tinker. She's a recent graduate of Yale and is an NWHL defenseman. Let's go, ladies. And I'm your host, Jen Sherman, and we will catch you next time. Thank you for tuning into another episode of We Are Everyone. You can subscribe to We Are Everyone on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and also be sure to visit www.pivotalmoments.org to learn more about the organization. And we also want to hear what mental wellness means to you. So you can follow us on social media, submit your video, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.